And I tell you, the journey of Joseph is one of the great stories in the Bible. It's a phenomenal story, and I attempt to do it justice in the next 30 minutes. But know that where we've come from this month is around Genesis, the origins, the beginnings. The starting point of not just the Bible, but of all of creation in the beginning. We go right back. So the first message we had was exploring the beginning. And then we looked at the fall, how this glorious beginning was tainted by evil. And then the story of recovery, of restoration, of hope really has been, since Genesis 3, we've been looking at that, and it will accelerate out. But as we explore the early people, we get to Abraham. In Genesis 12, we get to see that he's the father of nations. We get to see that he's got this promise on his life to be a blessing, not just to his family, but actually to the entire world, right? Genesis 12:3, that Abraham will be a blessing to the entire world, every nation, tribe, and tongue. And then we just see that rolled out throughout the entire Bible, and we're still living in that day where the hope of Jesus is literally being spread throughout the whole world. Then we see we call them the patriarchs. Sounds very formal, doesn't it? The early fathers. We had Abraham, then Isaac, then Jacob. Jacob had a couple of kids. Just a few. Just checking that you're on the ball this morning. He had 12 sons, right? He became the 12 tribes of Israel. Big family. And we focus in today on child number 11. Anyone here who's child number 11? Probably not so common these days. But back then, certainly. And child number 11, his name was Joseph. And we're about 200 years on from Abraham, around about 1800 before Christ, about that era. And so we find out, I'm not going to put all the Bible verses because I've just got tons. If you want, I can flick you my notes at the end. If you want to see where all these scriptures are, I'm happy to do that. But maybe just listen to the story today. Get yourself into a story mode and settle in for a great journey. We discover that Joseph is a bit of a favorite. His dad, well, he kind of likes him. In fact, he thinks he's so awesome that Joseph gets a coat of many colors. You might have heard videos and stories and movies about this, and I searched my wardrobe for a coat of many colors and came up with black, because black has every color in it. Tough crowd this morning, I tell you. So Joseph had this coat of many colors, which signified that he was the favorite. Very, very clearly, number one kid, even though he was child by son number 11. And Joseph, we find out, is a bit of a dreamer. He gets these dreams. He gets a sort of a picture where he sees himself in a couple of ways above his brothers and above his family. And he says this in Genesis 37. He had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, careful who you share your dream with, they hated him even more. And he said to them, hear this dream that I have dreamed. He said to them, behold, we were binding sheaves in the field. And behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. Like think of the great big sort of leaves, right? My sheaf stood upright, and your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to my sheaf. Now, that's a good vision, good story. And his brothers said to him, are you indeed going to reign over us? I mean, what are you talking about? You're the 11th kid. You're just a boy. And so they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. He had another dream about all the stars and the moon bowing down to him, and they're going, we're sick of this kid. Who does he think he is? He's just a little squirt in a fancy cloth, and somehow he's telling us that he's going to be the ruler of us all. No, we're not going to put up with this. And so they devise a cunning plan. They're going to kill him. Then they kind of had a bit of remorse, and you might probably know the story. They throw him into a pit, and they take his coat off, and they find a goat and smear it with blood and take it back to his father, and they say, "Hey, Dad, sorry. This wild bear got him, and I couldn't, that's it. Yeah, here's Joseph." Of course, his father was devastated, his favorite son, and the devastation runs deep in his life, and we get hints of just a great sadness over Jacob is the father. And so we get this idea of a call or a vision. Now perhaps Joseph is a little unwise with this call. But perhaps he shouldn't have been just blurting it out. I'm going to be the prime minister. I'm going to be the greatest. Just you watch. I'm going to be, with tall poppy syndrome in Australia, we kind of pull people down a peg or two, don't we? Not in other countries. In other countries, we kind of encourage that kind of thinking. But what it's evidence of is a call. Now, this idea call or vocation is sort of the person's life. It's what you have deep in your soul, and sometimes you'll see it. Sometimes you'll have this sense of where you're going to go. But so often, the call of God is challenged, isn't it? So often, the things that God has got in your heart, the things that you've seen, the things that you're pursuing are directly challenged. And we find this challenge called a pit. He's gone from the promise to the pit, literally. He's in this pit. Maybe it's a well, maybe it's some kind of place, but he can't escape it. And it's better than being killed, I suppose. But they get mad at this dreamer. And so his brothers, they strip him, throw him into the pit. There was no water in it. But then his brothers see some traders come past. Midianite traders. And they drew Joseph out and they lifted him out of the pit and sold him to these Ishmaelite traders for 20 shekels of silver. $330 in today's land. That's all right, isn't it? $300? Price of a life. And so they're totally guilty of selling their brother, and they take him to Egypt, which is a foreign land. A place away from the promise of God. What do you think now, dreamer? What's happened to all those dreams of being the greatest? What's happened to all those dreams of being the stars and the moon and everybody bowing down to you? Do you still have that call inside of you? Do you still have that vocation of leading, of influencing? The gift is a pit. It's obscurity. It's a challenge to the vision. And you've got to start questioning the call of God in your life, don't you? I thought I was going to be this, but now locked up, sold as a good, as a possession. But you might know some of this story. You might know that out of the call and even into some obscurity, there's the emergence of the call of God on your life. And he ends up in Potiphar's house. Pick up the story. This is Genesis 39:1. Now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. This guy is significant. He's the captain of the guard of Egypt, servant under Pharaoh. He bought him from the Ishmaelites. And you might have watched movies where there's slave traders and, they're tied up and standing around, and the officer goes, they check out their muscles. I'd be right up there. Check out their intellect, maybe if they're going to be doing something. They check out their, their strength and stuff. Potiphar goes, this guy. How much? Make a deal. Come with me. You be a good fella around our place. We need some manual labor. Goodness. And so he's brought into this place. And it says in verse 2, the Lord was with Joseph. That word means with. Near, close. Even in this situation, the worst place you could be, sold as a slave, says the Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, even in a pit. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, Not only did Joseph know that God was with him, but everybody else could see that. His master goes, man, look at this guy. He's not just strong and good looking, but like everything he touches just flourishes. Clearly, God is with him and caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him and made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. My goodness, this is a fulfillment of a call, isn't it? Joseph gets this vision, this idea that he's going to be a ruler and influencer. And now he's gone from being the slave of the house. It's a meteoric rise, isn't it? From the pit to the Pharaoh's household. And so, not Pharaoh, sorry, so Potiphar's household. Rags to riches, prisoner to overseer. You can see the headlines now. The great politician, wouldn't he? I was there once, now I'm here. But is this the fulfillment of a dream? Is this it? Is this where he has to land? Because it could be sensible, hey. Could be kind of, yeah, this is kind of the moon and the stars bowing, like all the servants come to me. I'm in charge of this household. Maybe this is where I'm at. God doesn't think so. Because there's a problem. This wasn't the extent of his destiny. You see, Mrs. Potiphar, Mrs. Potiphar kind of liked him. Mrs. Potiphar thought he was all right. Like, all right. Mrs. Potiphar looked at those muscles. Maybe Mrs. Potiphar chose him at the slave market. Mrs. Potiphar starts making plans. I wonder if I could just, well, gosh, wouldn't it be, everybody's out. Everybody's out. Hey, Joseph. It says one day when he went to his house to do his work, none of the men of the house were in the house. She caught him by his garments saying, lie with me. And it doesn't mean an afternoon nap. He left his garment in her hand and fled. Got out of the house. He obeys a very good pastoral bit of advice around sexual immorality. Paul repeats it, 1 Corinthians 6:18. Flee sexual immorality. Good tip, everybody. Run. Don't argue with it. Don't justify it. Run. Don't put yourself there. Flee. So he did. He fled. But he left his coat behind. Not the fancy one, another one. So Mrs. Potiphar's there holding this coat. He's going, I'm going to get this guy because he didn't do what I wanted him to do. Goes and tells husband. And as soon as his master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, this is the way your servant treated me. This is what he did. He played sport with me, that young Hebrew. He tried to put me in bed. And the master gets angry. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. And he was there in prison. I tell you, this is now a fall, a complete disaster. He's gone from being the head of the household to now not just in a pit, but now in a prison, the deepest prison where the king's prisoners are falling. And he's going, oh, I'm ahead of myself on that screen, aren't I? Goodness. He's in prison. He's got this thing going on. Yet stuff still happens in prison. In 39:21, it says, the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. Even in prison, people look at him and going, this guy is awesome. So much so that the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who are in the prison. What sort of person does that? The newest prisoner comes in, he's good, this guy, we should put him in charge of all the prisoners. I mean, the guy's got something on him. He's good. And so he does that faithfully, but he's still languishing in prison. Yeah, he might be leading a prison, but it's not the call of God on his life. It's not, but the gifts emerge in whatever place he's put into. And it says in verse 23 that whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. This is called repositioning. He's being repositioned. It's the pit of preparation, because his destiny was way more than Potiphar's house, and it's way more than the prison. And you might know the story that while he's in the prison, there's two other guys come into prison. One's the chief cook, bread maker, and the other one is the wine taster. And they both get thrown into prison, and they have these really strange dreams. And Joseph has the ability to determine dreams. And so he tells them what's going to happen with his dreams. And suddenly it gets out that the Pharaoh starts having weird dreams too. And this is what we see here. We see Pharaoh raise up Joseph and say, hey, I've heard that in you is the spirit of the gods. Since God has shown you all this, can you tell me your dream? And Pharaoh has these dreams. And basically it's going to turn out that there's going to be 7 years of plenty. You know, pictures of fat cows and lots of grain. And it's going to be an amazing season for Egypt. But then it's going to be followed by 7 years of drought. And so Pharaoh goes, he says, can we find someone like this? It's Genesis 41:38. Can we find someone like this in whom is the Spirit of God? And he said to Joseph, since God has shown you all this, there is none so discerning and wise as you are. You shall be over my house. Sound familiar? Right? He was over Potiphar's house. He was put over the prison. And now Pharaoh goes, hang it. Like, you be in charge of Egypt. Like, clearly there's leadership on you. Clearly you've seen what's going to happen. Well, we need someone like you to be in charge of this entire situation. You shall be over my house, verse 40, and all my people shall order themselves as you command. Only as regards the throne will I be greater than you. Oh, goodness. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh took his signet ring off, put it on Joseph's hand, clothed him with garments of fine linen, and put a gold chain around his neck. He made him ride in his second chariot and called out before him, bow the knee. Thus he set him over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without your consent no one shall lift up a hand or a foot in all the land of Egypt. What a phenomenal position. This guy has gone from the pit, being cast off and sold as a slave, winding his way through a household and being accused falsely, back in prison. And then he arrives at Pharaoh's house, and Pharaoh quickly elevates him. He sees something in him. He sees the call of God in him. The spirit of the gods, Pharaoh calls him. So now Joseph is over the entire land. This young Hebrew boy in charge. My goodness. What I love most about this story, and obviously it's a big story, it's not just about him. He has this idea of blessing beyond. You see, his family are still back in the land of Canaan. His 11 brothers, sisters, parents, all the family, and it's getting pretty tough there. This is a big drought. And about 2 years into the drought, his dad says, hey, I've heard that there's grain in the land of Egypt. I've heard that they're doing okay down there. Take some money, go and buy something. So they do. And it's a fun story. I won't go into the whole thing, but they go down and they actually meet up with Joseph, the younger brother, but they don't recognize him. They do a deal, and he goes back, and there's a bit of interplay, and basically says, eventually, well, I'll read it. He says, come near to me, please. And they came near, and he said, this is Genesis 45:4. They came near, and he said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. What would you do right now? Here are the brothers. Remember those memories? Remember those cold nights in prison? Remember fearing for your life? Remember being sold as a slave? What are you going to do? You're going to just get them all back now that you're the ruler? And now, verse 5, do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. Hear that? Don't be angry, for God sent me before you to preserve life. This is the plan of God. You mean the plan of God was to send me to prison? You mean the plan of God was to put me in a pit? And he's been able to see Genesis 50:20, which is what you desired for evil, God meant for good. God will always turn things around for a greater blessing. This is such a powerful story because God has been in charge all along. Verse 8 says, so it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh and land of all his house and ruler of the land of Egypt. Hurry, go to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, who he thinks is dead. God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me and do not tarry. And he sends gold chariots and an entourage from Egypt back up to the land of Canaan to collect his father and about 70 of the close family. And they come down and they get to live in the land of Goshen, which is the best bit of the land. Pharaoh says, hi, your family's come. Here, everybody else move out. Joseph's family's here. Have the best of the land. You see, God knew that this was all going on. He positions Joseph. And from there, they actually spend the next 400 years in Egypt. It goes a bit sour, and you might know the story. They need to escape. Moses brings them out of Exodus, and then we get the whole journey of the next 4 books. But what's amazing here is the pattern. It's like, so what? This story is, almost 4,000 years old. What has that got to do with me here, Bathurst 2024? Let me tell you, there's something really powerful about this story. See, 2,000 years later, a guy called Jesus comes. Look at this. Jesus has a call, a birth, a vision. In Luke 1:32, that he will be great. He will be called Son of the Most High God. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of God. Sound like a dreamer to you? That was what was said about Jesus at his birth. But then there's this kind of pit experience for Jesus. We don't hear about him for about 30 years. We get a glimpse of him in the temple when he's about 10. But apart from that, well, where is this great dreamer? Oh, he's hiding in Nazareth. He's building tables. What? Nazareth? Nothing comes out of Nazareth. Like, what's up there? The carpenter's son? Come on, dreamer. Can you see this same story, this same pattern? This is so fun. There's this obscurity, there's this challenge, but he's hiding in plain sight. But then he starts to emerge. We get this ministry years. For 3 years, Jesus appears and does incredible things. It's like him being in Potiphar's house. He emerges. This is who he is. Heals people and does amazing things, and the life comes. But hang on. It's just 3 years. It's like being in Potiphar's house, and then, now we've got the biggest pit. He's actually cast way into prison, not just prison, but death prison. He's executed. Now what's to become of this vision? Why didn't he become king of Israel? Why didn't he take back the nation from the Romans? It's just 3 years. Now all is lost. But on the third day, there's a resurrection. And 50 days later, there's an ascension. And then Jesus goes to be with the Father, and now fulfilling the dream of not just one little nation, but the entire planet, that Jesus came for the whole world, and that he's going to a place to prepare for us. Can you see this? The fulfillment of a call. Now, even Jesus, even the call of Jesus is like this, isn't it? You look at the life of Jesus. Even John the Baptist looked at Jesus and goes, is this the guy who we think he is? Do you remember the story? Send some people like, are you really the Messiah? Like, how come this death thing? Like, what? It wasn't, we just expect life, don't we? Something good's going to happen, it's just going to happen like this. We wonder why we live in a world of challenge and ups and downs. Joseph, even with the greatest call, Jesus, with the greatest call in his life, suffered those times where that vision is challenged and that call is difficult. But Joseph and Jesus never let go of the call that was on their life. In fact, God didn't let go of them. And they ended. Joshua, it was bringing all of his family into the best of the land. Isn't that what Jesus is doing? He's bringing all of his family into the best of the land. He's such a great parallel. You see Jesus in the Old Testament. But before I wrap up, I just think there's one more little narrative that we can weave in here. Maybe that's you and me. Maybe we've got a vision and a call. Genesis 1 says that we're made in God's image, male and female. And he gave us a vision to fill the earth and caretake it. That's our call. Multiply, we've done pretty well at that. Caretake it, maybe not so well. But that's the call of God for us. And then particular, like specific calls, you know. God doesn't call us all to be kings like Joseph. But he calls us to be something. And all of us have a call, a vocation, whether it's what you get paid to do or not. There's something inside of you that when you're doing it, the glory of God comes alive. Maybe it is playing music, or maybe it's writing or creating something, or maybe it's talking with people. Maybe it's caring for elderly folk. Maybe it's teaching little kids in a school. Maybe you're really good with numbers. You know, maybe you're very smart. Like all of this, there's an individual call in your life as well as a collective call for all of us. And God will see that call come to pass. He will, even as it's kind of challenged. The reality of our humanity is that we're fallen, right? Even though we've got this grand call to fill the earth and care for it, it's challenged with the reality of who we are. A sinful nature and just our propensity to screw things up. But then, just like Joseph in a pit, we emerge and we come out and we see little hints that we were dead, but God made us alive. You know, Ephesians 2:4. Because of his great love. It's like being in Potiphar's house. We get a glimpse of who we are. But then sometimes even that gets challenged and we're thrown back into prison. And Romans 5 says not only this, but we celebrate our tribulations, knowing that tribulation brings about perseverance, and perseverance proven character, and character hope. God knows even in dark times and trial times, there is a place for God to work and to bless us, even in a prison. But I'm telling you, there will be a day where the things that God's put in you will be fulfilled. Even if not in this life. When Jesus comes back again and makes all things new, I tell you, you will be fulfilled in the new creation. You might only see this in part right now. You might be the greatest architect the world's never known. And maybe you've made a house. But I tell you, there's plenty of opportunity coming up. You might be the greatest teacher, and you feel like, oh, my current role, like there's just 20 kids, and but I feel like I want to redesign the education system, but I'm stuck with these 20. But I tell you, there's coming a time where just your genius and the call of God on your life will be lifted up. You gotta believe that. This is the pattern. We see it in Joseph. We see it in Jesus. There will be a fulfillment of the things that God has wired into you, your call, the things that's in you. There will be a fulfillment, more than what you see now. And it's like you'll be Joseph in the land of Egypt. Not all of us will be Josephs. But I'm telling you, the purpose of your life is rich. Can I grab the musos up on the stage? We're going to sing in a minute about the good plans of God. But I tell you, there's going to be some ups and downs in life, hey? There's going to be some challenges. There's going to be some seasons where you look at your situation and you go, there is no hope here. There is no future. How could God rescue me out of this pit? Maybe it's anxiety and despair and depression. Maybe it's just some situations that are happening right now. And you think that there is no future for the call of God in my life. How can I get out of this situation right now? That's why the message of Joseph, that's why the message of Jesus is such good news. Because he doesn't just wave things around and go, get out. He walks with you in the dark places. He sits with the prisoner and the lonely. He sits with those who need comfort. And he works situations around. Not just for your blessing, but for all of the blessing, all of the fulfillment of the entire world. You can start singing that.